day, rough week, rough everything, but let's do Sam Peckinpah Part 2, because we ended it with the Wild Bunch. But there are other stories involved. You see that Sam sort of inspired a camaraderie among his actors, his stock company, because his whole thing was he was a creative guy. Actors were creative people, but the big sticking point was the studios. It was the mentality of us against them, which it was at times. Sam would, go over budget, shoot long. Sam would shoot thousands of feet of film and then spend time editing them. And also, as we all know, Sam was a drinker. Sam was a partier. L.Q. Jones related this story about on the set of Major Dundee that they went into a Mexican bar, him, Sam, and Ben Johnson. Sam got a mug of beer, took a mouthful, spit it in the bartender's face and said, "Did your cow piss in this?" All of a sudden this huge fight breaks out, and LQ says it was me and Ben Johnson back to back, dodging bottles, knives, and fists and shit. And where was Sam? Sam left. He went out in the parking lot and left. So there was a lot of, wild shit going on there too. After the Wild Bunch, he had done Ballad of Cable Hogue with Jason Robards, David Warner, and L.Q. Jones and Strother Martin came back as two desert rats that double-crossed them. Film isn't a Grindhouse film, it's a rather poignant film. And then he did a rodeo film with Steve McQueen called Junior Bonner with Preston Foster, Joe Don Baker, and others. Problem was, the year that Junior Bonner came out, so did a bunch of rodeo films. The Honkers, and I think Burt Reynolds one, T.J. Hooper or something like that. So it sort of got lost in the shuffle. Well, after working with McQueen, he wanted to work with McQueen again, and that came about with The Getaway. One thing he didn't like about The Getaway was the casting of Ali MacGraw, because she became Steve's squeeze, Steve's girl. And what Sam didn't know, he had to go along with it because Steve was the star, and Ali MacGraw couldn't drive. So they had to give her a crash course in driving because part of her character was to drive. So this was a heist film. Alex Rocco was in it as the main heavy. Ben Johnson as the crooked politician. Sally Struthers as, some kind of weird kidnap victim that the Letterly character had. I believe his name was Rudy. Bo Hopkins was in it for a brief moment before he got shot in the balls for screwing up and kicked out of a moving car. It was action all the way, and it was also, as far as Steve and Sam were concerned, this was going to be a huge moneymaker, and it was. And it gave Sam the wherewithal to go on to a next project, The Killer Elite. But in the interim, unfortunately, I believe, the story goes that, Warren Oates had introduced Sam to cocaine. And being that Sam had such an addictive personality with the booze, that was really the fucking wrong thing to do. So when they were doing The Killer Elite, which starred James Caan was a huge cokehead. And when his dealer showed up, on set, Sam was sort of fucked, it was like he couldn't get away. It was like a kid in a candy store. So that was sort of fueling his decline, so to speak, because, he was doing a lot of that. He was drinking, and then there was stories of him, Seymour Kessel, and Warren Oates going out to Warren's cabin in Colorado and getting snowed in with basically nothing but liquor and coke. So, there's stories floating around all over the place. I think there was one thing where Sam actually went down to South America, was going to smuggle some shit in, and a bunch of crap happened, but luckily he didn't go to jail. Like I said, a lot of this stuff is in the two books I mentioned previously. The big thing that was going on, another film, was Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia. And this was completely condemned by the critics as violent, horrible crap. And basically the lead was Warren Oates, and Warren Oates was basically playing Sam Peckinpah. The dark glasses, the white jacket, and things like that. Chris Christopherson and a couple other people were in it as rapists. Isla Vega, a huge star in Mexico, was the female lead. It was basically, they were looking for a guy who knocked up this Jeffe's daughter down in Mexico, again played by Emilio Fernandez, and there was a bounty put on the head of Alfredo Garcia. Well, the thing was that Alfredo had already kicked a bucket before the bounty was offered on him, and Warren Oates basically had to dig him up and chop his head off with a shovel and keep the head in a sack in a bag full of ice on the car where flies buzzed around it. There was two hit men played by Gig Young and Robert Weber who were basically gay. There was a ton of fucking shoot-ups. Like I said, the love interest was Isla Vega, and she was killed in the process of getting the head. So when Warren Oates, his character was Benny, delivered the head to Emilio Fernandez, it was like this head cost 20-something people their lives, and one was a good friend of mine, and he blows Emilio Fernandez away and starts to leave, and the car's being riddled with bullets, and the final scene is on the barrel of a machine gun spitting lead. Again, critics crapped all over it because of its unhinged violence, but today another film that's regarded as a great film. Like I said, Sam was, getting more and more into the drug use, and he was tapped to do this film, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, where James Coburn was cast as Pat Garrett, and Chris Christopherson was cast as Billy the Kid. Well, they had brought Bob Dylan in, trying to get him a role, and Sam, of course, was like this about Bob Dylan until Bob wrote a song, and after Sam heard the song, he kept saying, "That son of a bitch, this and that and the other thing," and he was actually brought to tears by the song. So he hired Bob to play this character alias that eventually joins Chris Christopherson, Billy the Kid's gang. What Sam did was he basically rounded up every living Western character actor there was and cast them in the film. But the film was being produced by this guy named James Aubrey, who was called the Smiling Cobra. And Aubrey liked to fuck with filmmakers. He liked to destroy their product. And of course, Sam took this as a challenge. So in hiring all these great character actors, like Jack Elam said in an interview, he was only supposed to be there for 3 weeks, but Sam made sure he hung around for 3 months and got paid. Jack was also tapped to be one of the bounty hunters in the Wild Bunch, but he blew it off because he said, "I'm friends with Sam, and if you're friends with Sam, you have to drink with Sam." And he goes, "Me be down in Mexico drinking with Sam for how many months? Probably would have killed me." But like he said, he goes, "I was, tapped to work for 3 weeks, and Sam stretched it out into 3 months, so I got paid for 3 months." So the way I'm looking at it, that was basically Sam's fuck you to the studio, because he was costing him money and getting his friends paid. There was a bunch of stuff going on. They had a bad lens, and when they were watching the dailies, Sam stood up, stood on a chair, and pissed an S on the screen and stormed out, which caused Bob Dylan to turn to Chris Christopherson and say, "What the fuck do we get ourselves into?" Well, Sam did a lot of stuff on the sneak to make the film work, and unfortunately the editors chopped it up, and it was released pretty much as an incoherent mess at times. Of course, there was guys getting shot, and like I said, who is who of character actors? L.Q. Jones, Gene Evans, again Jack Elam, Richard Jekyll, Elijah Cook Jr., John Beck. Look on IMDb. Like I said, it's a who's who of character actors. I don't know how well it did at the box office, but when it was restored to where it was supposed to be, where Sam wanted it, it's a great film. His next one, I believe, was Convoy, which was cashing in on the whole CB trucker craze of the 70s. Basically, we all were assholes driving around with CB radios, and it was basically a a protest against the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit that Nixon had set to save energy, and it was a renegade trucker called the Rubber Truck, played by Chris Christopherson, and again, his love interest was Ally McGraw, so I guess whatever feelings Sam had for Ally McGraw, he had patched them up by then. Ernest Borgnine was the sheriff, Dirty Lyle, and it said that Sam was really in bad shape during this, and it got to the point where Ernie, who was a pretty mellow guy, got really pissed off and started banging on the door of Sam's trailer, telling him to get out here and shoot the damn film. Well, it wound up that James Coburn, who wanted a director's shot, basically directed a lot of that film. I don't know if he was credited with it or not, but basically he was the one who directed a lot of the film. Unfortunately, Sam's last effort, wasn't that great. I mean, the other thing was I keep forgetting that he did a film over in Europe called The Cross of Iron, which was going to be a World War II film, again starring James Coburn in the lead and David Warner. I'm trying to think who the hell else. The problem with that thing was I liked the film, but there was a lot of things going on where Sam was promised a lot of shit and never got it. The money wasn't there. I think they only had 2 tanks. It was an anti-war film, but it sort of tanked in the States. I don't even know if it's available anymore on a DVD. It was out on a really shitty a pan and scan version on a company called Hen's Tooth Video. I don't think, as far as I know today, there hasn't really been a Blu-ray or restored version put out. But that was sort of like a kick in the teeth for Sam, because he was promised a lot and got basically nothing and went over there and worked under really shitty conditions. His last film was The Osterman Weekend with Burt Lancaster, Rutger Hauer, I believe, Craig T. Nelson and a few others. It was a spy drama versed on a book. Really didn't do too well theatrically, and Sam unfortunately passed away pretty soon after that in his mid-60s. Everything just gave out because of all the shit he was doing. But, the reality of the situation is that the films that he made are, considered classics today, major and minor, and his influence has been felt, like I said, worldwide, not only in Grindhouse films, but of course overseas in Hong Kong. John Woo picked up, the slow motion Dance of Death, as did a lot of other Asian filmmakers. So again, he's one of my favorite directors, and The Wild Bunch is probably one of my favorite films. Like I said before, as far as a remake, I don't know. I don't get it. I don't know why people remake shit. Why don't you create something original? But like I said before, Sam was one of the best, and unfortunately the booze and the drugs and a bunch of shit just derailed his career and unfortunately derailed his life. But like I said, left us a great legacy. So Sam, wherever you are in the beyond, probably drinking with a lot of guys who are no longer with us, thank you. You just gave a great contribution to the world of cinema and to the world in general. So that's it for today. I'm not smoking any weed because it's just one of those days and I'm just taking it easy. So mask up, stay safe, don't believe any of this shit you're being fucking told. We're in a bad situation. This virus is fucking real.